if the coworker does not like the principles, or if they want to have it or do not want to have it, try to have a reasonable conversation with them. And I still believe I did at the time,
Mm,
but you may still not reach a resolution. Now, how do you handle those situations? If I want to have a conversation today with a tech person, uh, I think it would be world actually wants to know whether they're getting value for the dollar that they're paying. Now, they might go into a store, pay $3,000 for a handbag. That's because they value the handbag. They see $3,000 worth of value in that handbag, which, I mean, I'm taking that example because when you see that you're like, oh my god, you can spend 3,000 on a bag because there are $20 bags available or $30 bags. But when you sell a $20 service, you get asked so many questions.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Vibe It Up, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of tech and software development. I'm your host, Dan Tudorache, and I bring over 20 years of experience in the software development industry, wearing multiple hats as a solution architect, coach, trainer, and psychologist now. Now, what with this Vibe It Up about? Well, Vibe It Up is not just a podcast, but it's a community. It's a space where we connect with tech professionals from seasoned experts, visionary directors of engineering, solution architects, software architects, and inspiring team leaders, and so on. So we have today with us Krish, and I will let himself present because I don't want to say wrong his name. But Krish, welcome, and please give us a brief overview of your current role and responsibilities in this industry. Welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate you taking the time to have this chat. I'm super excited. By way of introduction, my name is Krish Palaniappan. I'm the
Hmm.
CTO at Snowpal, a software company that's based out of the suburbs of Washington, D.C. We provide backends as services to help companies reduce time to market for their applications. Our SaaS products are available on multiple API hubs, including AWS Marketplace. We do a number of things in the company, but just to keep it short, I'll say that we have web apps, mobile apps, APIs, courses. We do podcasts. We sort of cover the gamut of things when it comes to software, and we love building software. I would say that's the shortest way to introduce myself and my team.
Well, that was a very comprehensive, nonetheless, short but wide. So, could you share a bit about your background and your journey in the tech world, leading up to your current position?
Sure. And feel free to interrupt me then because I can talk at length. So if you need, don't just interrupt me if I'm not answering the question or if you have a question
Yes,
related to what I'm saying.
will do,
So,
will do.
yep. So my journey, I don't know where you want me to start. You want me to start in the last few years, or do you want me to go back like many years? How far back do you want me to go?
Uh, from the start and just to pinpoint
Okay, sure. I can do that. Yep.
your roadmap.
Yep. So I've been building software for over 2 decades at this point, much like yourself. I do it for maybe a couple of reasons. The main reason is, as I tell everybody else, I don't have any other skill. I would love to have known how to play a musical instrument, or I would have loved to know how to dance or have some creative talents. I don't have any of those talents, right? So it's simple. It's not like I have like 10 career options available. There's literally one option available, and thankfully, thanks to God, I actually liked that. I ended up enjoying what I did. So I was in college for a long time back in India. I grew up in India, in the southern part of India. I was in college for 5 years, completed two master's degrees, and then I came to the US when I was very young, or younger, at least relatively speaking. Looking at me now, I did another master's. So collectively, I think I was in college for like almost 8 years, 7.5 years, I would say, right? In hindsight, if I went back, would I have, would I choose to be in college for 8 years? I don't think so, right? But that's a different story. But I enjoyed what I did. while I was in college. The experience was great. More than the learning, the experience and the journey was quite nice. So I came here, I studied, and then I did engineering primarily, right? All a variety of engineering courses. I think I've done about 325 credits in college credits, some pretty big number in terms of the number of courses. But most of them were actually not sales, like marketing and management and other engineering courses, not software as much, right? I did about 30 credits in software, which is less than almost 10% of the entire coursework, right? So I didn't think I was going to end up in software. But when I wrote my first line of code, that actually was not a code that was paid for, but it was a college project when I was here, and it actually went to production, if you will, right? I wrote something for a restaurant, and they started using the software, and I enjoyed the process of writing. I enjoyed doing that even when I was doing it back in India, but I didn't do much of it. But as I wrote code, I realized I actually truly enjoyed doing that. I felt like this is it. Sometimes it takes you a long time to find your calling. It took me 350 or 325 college credits before I found my calling. That, okay, I actually want to do this. So unlike the kids these days, they are studying programming in sixth grade or eighth grade or really young. It was not my experience, right? I was studying a number of other things, but eventually I found, I think, what I like, but starting my first job, right? So my journey started with my first job back in Ohio, right? And then since then, I'll pause here so you can ask me anything else. But since then, I've been working for different companies of all sizes, right? From large product companies to really small startups to even smaller, individual investors. Sometimes, right? They have a little bit of money. They're like, "Hey, Krish, can you build this for me?" So for the last many years, I've worked with really small organizations and individuals, if you will, and I enjoy doing that thoroughly to the point that I started my company many years ago, and now we are live in production with a variety of different kinds of applications, right? That's the whole summary. I know it was not in a beautifully chronological order, unlike a resume, but I guess I started at the beginning and I skipped 20 years and I came to this current day and age. My apologies for that. Yeah.
No worries, no worries. It's okay. I will get to that journey, but from a different perspective. So reflecting on what you said and your early career, what were some key roles or projects maybe that significantly influenced your professional growth?
Sure. I'll say the very first is I always think this is close to my heart because even though I was in college for so many years, I didn't have any paid. I hadn't done any internships. I did some internships, but not the traditional form of internships may see today, at least not in the
Hmm.
space of writing software, right? So when I got my first job, it was remarkable because again, I believe in being honest at every step of my life, and I was no different 2 decades ago. I told my team that interviewed me that, hey, this is what I've done. I like to do this, but I really don't have much by way of experience to prove that I've done all these things, or I can do it. But somebody gives you an opportunity, right? Now you could say that, hey, people gave you an opportunity because you had these college degrees, you did these credits. Sure, but I did not. That was not my first interview. So there were people who had rejected me along the way. It's natural, right? So there was somebody who decided to take the chance, and they took the chance, and uh, I couldn't be more thankful because sometimes you need that first group of people to sort of guide you and tell you, no, no, I think you can do that. You are capable of doing that because no matter how, it's important that we believe in our own abilities, but it doesn't hurt if somebody else has that level of trust and belief as well, right? And it's much harder when you're in your early days in your life and career. So after I took up the job, I'll tell you, it was not a project, but I wrote one line of code, and I've called out for that in a lot of these other conversations I've had with people because it's actually, I think, a good story, and it's a true story. I wrote one line of code, Dan, and that code was not remarkable. It was creating a synonym for an oracle table or a column, right? uh, and there were 40 other synonyms. I had to create the 41st one. So you can imagine, right? It was no different from the other 40 lines above, right? It was exactly the same. All that it was just the name was different. But my DBA, the database admin, Gina, she sat down with me, right? And she said, Krish, let's write your first line of code. and she made me write it. She encouraged me while I was writing that single line of code. I mean, it would have taken her like 25 milliseconds to write that code, commit, push the changes, review it, get it merged, and push to production, right? Or whatever the process was at that point of time. But yet she made me do it. And then the next day, it got even better. The next day in the meeting, she called out for the work I did and said, "This new developer has his first commit checked in." And people applauded that activity. You know what I mean? Think about it, 2 decades later, I was like, they didn't have to do any of that. They could have taken all of it for granted, right? You were hired to do a job, and this is like one line of code which looked like the other 40 lines of code. So why does anyone have to sit with you? Why does anyone have to acknowledge it? But somebody did. And 2 decades later, I still remember that because it means a lot to me, which tells you that, it's one thing schools and colleges always test you, more than teaching you. Sometimes they're only testing you, right? But there are people who actually guide you and give you that inspiration. So it's not the size of the project that matters. It's the magnitude does play a role, obviously, right? More complex it is, the more scalable, the more sizable it is, the more you're going to learn. I'm not taking anything away from that, but sometimes even the simplest things you do can inspire you to do a lot more. So to me, as simple as that project, quote unquote, was writing that one line of code, Dan, I would say that is actually a very important first project as far as I'm concerned.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. Wonderful story. And it's about the people and not about the process and not about the technology. By the way, what technology did you started with? I understood that you worked with the databases first, and
Yeah,
yes, but
the
mhm,
very first job, right? My first job, I they hired me to do Pro C and Oracle
mhm,
work, right? So it's C
okay.
programming, but I think it was Pro Star C because you had the drivers connecting to Oracle, if I recall correctly. So it was
Hmm.
essentially writing C code and then writing some database queries, right? It's pretty much that was what I did for the first 6 months, I think, and then after the sixth month, they had some new work coming up. So they were like, "Hey, I did a fair bit of work in the first 6 months. I think they like me. I'm glad that they like me." So they let me gave me an opportunity to actually get started with Java at the time, which is very new at the time.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I started with C and Oracle, and it did a good number of amount of shell scripting. Not enough, not a whole lot, but did a fair bit of shell scripting during the first 6 to 8 months, and then I started working on Java projects. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, wonderful. So, can you recall a specific challenge during that time or obstacle you faced early in your
Yeah,
career and
absolutely.
how that shaped your approach to this programming and problem solving skills
Sure.
that you have?
Great question, right? See, when you work with somebody who's better than you, and I've been blessed to work with people who are always everybody I work with is smarter than I am, which is you have to be sort of lucky to be in that space, but you also have to find yourself into that space because sometimes it's easy to get into a comfort zone and enjoy what you do, but not do anything differently, right? So we're gonna have to you can't expect other people to push you outside your comfort zones. You're going to have to push yourself outside your comfort zones. That's when you're going to run into people who are smarter than you all the time, right? I mean, you'll run into smart people all the time regardless, but you make it even more possible by pushing yourself outside this comfort zone. The first 6 to 12 months I worked with somebody called Alex, who was and still in my mind is the best shell scripter I've ever had the privilege to work with, right? He was so good in shell scripting. It was amazing to me as somebody who's younger out of college. And even today, even though I do write shell scripts, but not all the time, right? I mean, I don't know how many people write it full time today, but I do write it, but not enough. It was amazing to see Alex take any problem and break it down into a solution that he could script. Right? He was awesome with like sed and awk and even Perl and every aspect of the whole the gamut of like shell programming per se. Right? He was absolutely brilliant. And my early days, I had to do some of that work, and it was a challenge to me because I knew shell scripting, but as like a college kid, so to speak, right? You've done some shell scripting, but you're not like speaking that shell language, not. Yeah, exactly. So learning from somebody who's writing it as he was writing it We didn't have a notion of pair programming at the time. It was not called it. A lot of these terminologies, as to me, are fancy these days. But if you're a good engineer, you worked with good people, you would have most likely done everything. You just didn't use terms in those days, for instance, right? So I saw him write that shell script as he wrote the script all the time. And I could sort of understand the way he was approaching the problem. It's one thing to see a script after somebody writes it, a piece of code, but it's quite different when you see that person thinking through that process, which is why in my podcast, Dan, I actually think through when I solve the problems. I don't come prepared to any podcast, right? So I just try to make the mistakes while I'm doing the recording, so I know people understand that, hey, you could have done this for 2 decades and you could still be doing silly mistakes. It's nothing wrong in doing those mistakes, right? As long as we learn from those mistakes. So looking at Alex do write those shell scripts and being challenged to write more of them was my initial challenges, right? Wanting to do it, wanting to write a lot of code, and being able to work with people who wrote beautiful code and who did not shy away from teaching somebody else who knew a lot lesser, was how I would describe my early year or years, the first 2 years of my work experiences. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, and thinking back of those times after that, are there any specific projects or decisions that you made that played a crucial role in shaping your trajectory or journey afterwards?
Yeah, I don't know if you've read this poem by Robert Frost, my famous poet, "The Road Not Taken," right? You may have read it. If not, I definitely recommend folks watching this to read it. It's one of my favorite poems, and I quote that all the time. You know, it- when I read the poem when I was younger, I thought I was at the crossroads as somebody who was young enough, was graduating, moved to a new country, I had to make some big decisions.
Mm,
Little did I know that you would be at the very same crossroads every so often in your life. It'd just be a slightly different crossroad. You'll be looking at two different roads, but just in a slightly different perspective for in a different scenario. But the decisions will have to be made, not once in life, not twice. You're going to have to make those decisions every single day, and not all of them are going to turn out to be the perfect decisions. It's like buying a stock, right? No matter how much reading you do, no matter how much analysis you do, you got all your numbers right. You did the price and earnings ratio, you looked at the past history, where the future is going, you did the macroeconomics, the microeconomics, you looked at the company, the industry, the beta ratios, and you're like, man, I'm equipped to making this decision. I'm going to make this beautiful decision where I'm going to become a millionaire. Maybe the market doesn't turn out to be the way you expect for it to turn out, right? So I think we are going to be constantly at those crossroads, and each of those decisions is going to be irreversible. I mean, some decisions you can reverse it sort of, because it's not that dramatic, perhaps, the magnitude of those decisions, but a lot of the decisions are irreversible. And even the ones that you think are reversible are not, because the time has already been spent. You cannot go back and buy back that time. So maybe the impact of those decisions is not as profound, but you cannot take away the fact that they are also irreversible decisions as well. So I think a lot of these decisions we make on a daily basis shape our future. Some make seismic differences, and some other decisions not make. It's like going to a movie, right? You go to a movie, you made a decision, you had three choices, you picked one, it was terrible, you lost 2 hours, that's okay, right? There's not much to recover from. But there are other decisions that will have a much larger impact. So I'll tell you some of the decisions. I work for Oracle as my second job, right? I wanted to work for a large company, a product company, and they were one of the best product companies at the time. I think they're still a very good product company, but perhaps they're not one of those magnificent sevens, right? They're not a $3 trillion company, but it is still a good product company even today. I wanted to work for Oracle. I applied, I got a job at Oracle, and I thought, okay, this is it. This is all I wanted to do. I enjoyed what I did thoroughly for the next 5 years, right? I enjoyed my team, I enjoyed everything I did. But I started worrying because I got too comfortable working in the company with the team, doing those sets of things. I was worried that it put me in a comfort zone. Even though the work itself kept changing, it was challenging. But the fact that I was in the same organization, working with the same group of people, even though I enjoyed working with those people, it still made me think, will I survive? Will I survive if I left this quote unquote home, sort of, right? And I get out to a different company. So I made a decision. even though it was a stable team, a stable company, the work was fine, they paid me all right. I said, I'm going to take chances, because not taking chances was not an option for me. I don't know why. It is not even, it's not an option even today. So some of us gravitate towards safer decisions, some others not so much, right? The more safe the decision, the more unsafe we start feeling, if that even makes sense. So I decided to quit working for a large company and was in the quest to work for startups. I wanted more chaos. I wanted less structure. I wanted places where I could do more, not just deep, but I could do things broader. I wanted to understand how to run companies. How do small companies have lesser money, fewer members in the team? How do they get stuff done? I understand if you have a lot of money and brilliant people, a lot of people, you can get a lot of cool stuff done. Sure, right? But what if you don't have all the money? What if you don't have all the best of the people, because the companies cannot afford to pay these top dollars? Can you still get work done? What does it mean for that? And I didn't want to read it and understand. I want to live it, right? It's one thing to sit in the passenger seat and go 5,000 miles. You could have sat in the seat for 10,000 miles. You could have gone all over the world. But unless you are in the driver's seat, Dan, as we know, it's different. It's very different, right? When you hold the steering wheel and you start driving, you're not sure, oh my God, what do I look? I mean, what should I anticipate? What are the traffic rules? Which signs are important, which are not as important as others, right? So I quit and I started working for smaller companies. So to me, that is one of the most important decisions I made, because of all the irreversible decisions, that singular decision to me is, from a career standpoint, that's the single most irreversible decision as far as I'm concerned.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and based on your entire experience and lesson learned along the way, how do you approach it now, and you advise younger people to take critical decision points in their career?
Sure. This is something someone told me in the last podcast, my guest. I'm going to repeat what he actually said. He said, fail. I'm going to paraphrase what he said, but he said it beautifully. I'm not going to just do justice to how he said it, but I'm still going to capture the essence of it. uh, you have to take risks and you have to fail fast, right? Unless, I mean, that's, I think, he said it much better, but that's the essence of it. You don't want to put yourself in a space where you feel, it's nice to be in a safe place at work. By safe, I mean from a technical standpoint, from a comfort zone standpoint, right? um, but sometimes, if you play too safe, it's going to be the most riskiest decision you'll end up making. Sometimes not taking chances is taking the biggest chance right there. So you want to make sure you try everything you want to. I mean, you've got one life to live. I'm not a motivational speaker, but if I'm older than you and if I've lived more years at this point than you have, then this is the one piece of advice I would give you, which is try it. Just try it. I mean, you might fail, and it's very likely that you probably know that you're going to fail this. I mean, maybe you fail the next one. You might fail the fifth attempt from today, but still you're going to maybe succeed the sixth time around, or the seventh time, or the 10th time, or the 15th time. Who knows when it is? I wish you succeed in your very first attempt. We all do. But if you don't, it doesn't matter, right? The only thing you could possibly do is you're going to have to keep trying. When you read, it says try, try, and try until you succeed. It's just a bunch of English words strung together in a sentence. But when you actually go through the process of trying something, failing, or being discouraged by people around you, some with good intent, maybe others with not such good intent, it doesn't matter. You're going to have to back yourself, right? You know yourself best. It's not for other people to make a judgment on what Dan can do or what Krish can do. I cannot tell you the number of times people have told us, oh, you want to go live with the money you have or the money you don't have, or with the people you have or the people you don't have, or the skills you have or the skills you don't have. The only meaningful advice, I call it meaningful, quote unquote, is do lesser. People have asked us to do lesser, right? That's the advice. I was like, you know what, that's not useful advice to me. Doing lesser, can you tell me how I could try to do what I want to do, but with the resources I might have available to me? That would be priceless advice, and it would be invaluable to us. But telling us to do lesser, And sometimes people tell us not even try it because it's so difficult, don't even bother trying. We've patiently listened to those advices, not necessarily imbibed all of them, and still executed on what we thought we were able to do or not able to do, right? So I think I recommend, do not settle in life, right? No matter how old you are, you're probably too young to settle. You never have to settle because we have leaders who are a lot older, who are inspiring in different ways, telling us that, hey, you know what, age is sometimes just a number. So make sure you give it your best till you have the ability to give it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, awesome. Um, it's something that it always was in my mind and mindset to find something new and challenging to be exposed at new technologies, new business types, or other types of projects. And speaking of that, of being with the mindset in fail often and fail fast. That was the thing. Um, why is emotional intelligence important in tech industry, and more particular in leadership roles?
It's a great question, right? I want to believe I've become emotionally intelligent more so than I was before, but it's a journey, right? I don't know if you could anyone could say that you've gotten to that point, but I think it's important because there are, when you fail, it's not just the word. You're going to feel differently. You're going to feel like you want to give up. You don't want to do it. You want to do something that's easier, and you will have options. I mean, all of us, once you go to college, you study, you give it your best, and you have experience, you are going to have more than one option, right? I don't know how many options, it depends, but you are going to likely have options, and that itself is a blessing to have those options, because not everybody can actually say that they do have options. Now the good thing about options is that you have options, so it's like a nice thing. But it's a double-edged sword. There is also a bad thing, because when you're on this boat and you're sailing and the waters are calm, you keep sailing, right? And maybe you're not even sailing in the direction that you want to sail, but you still keep sailing because things are happening. You're able to pay your bills. You have some entertainment to watch. You do some travel, and you feel like, sure, this is probably what I was born to do. But sometimes you dig deeper and search for it. Are you truly happy? That's a very difficult question, right? Difficult question to answer. On paper, on the surface, everything looks like, somebody else might say, you got everything I want. Why are you not happy? But then we always, sometimes you want something that you don't have that seems to give you the happiness. I have a quote that's on hanging there. It's Albert Einstein's quote. Again, I might just not do justice reading it. It says, it talks about a calm mind. It says, I wish I had it in front of me. And if not, folks should look it up. It's Albert Einstein's quote. It says, a calm and modest life, I think, is worthy than a life lived with constant restlessness, right? I've completely butchered the quote, but please look up that quote. It's a beautiful quote. I think being happy with what we have, being calm about it, as difficult as it is, accepting failures, like, they're going to be there. It's very hard because I say this, but every day when there are days where you wake up and you're like going through these challenges of building something, selling that, and especially in the last couple of months, we started doing sales. For the first time, we're actually doing sales as engineers, and my heart goes out to all the sales people out there. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my entire life, right? It's very, very, very tiring, very exhausting. You have to be accepting of rejections, messages, emails. You're not getting responses to all of them. It's something that I mean, if you have told me 2 months ago, Krish, could you do this, I would have said probably not. But then again, you have to push yourself outside the comfort zone. As an engineer, engineering is my comfort zone. Even though we work on different languages all the time and different stacks, it's still the whole notion of engineering is a comfort zone. Sales is a different beast altogether. Getting out of the engineering comfort zone to sales is not necessarily easy, not for everybody. I know people will say, I don't even want to do it my entire life, right? But if you're running a small company, you don't get to make those choices and decisions. um, So being subject to rejections in many forms and shapes on a daily basis does take a toll, a mental toll. But being pragmatic about it and having a support system that actually tells you that no, you're going to be okay is very important. I think we've got to be blessed if you have that support system, and that support system can be a family or friends, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that, because for me personally, it's family more than friends, right? I mean, I would say it's strangers, people run into either literally or on LinkedIn, people who connect with me, like I we've connected recently, for instance, people working with each other collaboratively for mutual benefit, professional benefit, sure, but still trying to grow, right? Each of us is helping the other and making both of us grow. And it's, you start out as absolute strangers. And I've gotten great advice from people who honestly have not, they're not part of the company, they don't have a stake in the company, but they still, that's why I started my podcast too, to do, share my journey, my technical journey, in my everything I do right and things I've not done so right. It's literally documented by me recording it. I chose not to do it after launching a product or after launching a service or after making the millions, because you forget the difficulties you've probably endured along the way. So I personally, to me, it made sense to share the journey and the experience as you do it, so you get the direct expressions and the emotions and the feeling and whatnot. I know it was a long answer, but hopefully it was somewhere around along the lines of what you were expecting there, Dan.
Yes, it's a great answer. Actually, I went from engineering into sales when I started my own company too, and it
I'm
was the
sorry. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
yeah, I know. And it was the hardest thing I have done in the last 20 years. I mean, yes, when you get out of the your shell, which is programming, and you sit with the computer, and we sit you with the languages that you are coding in, and you try and see the real results on your screen, and after that on the website or the application you create. But working with people and trying to sell something and to bring value and to actually give them a glimpse of the value that you are trying to create for them, it's way more difficult. It's and it was for me too.
I can imagine, unbelievably difficult, right? Because I've realized that, having people part with the dollar that they have in hand is the
Hmm.
hardest thing to do. Personally, I'm not that tight with money as a person, right? My wife is
Hmm.
different. She's very careful about her expenditures and how she spends. I am not like that. So I subscribe to services before checking those services out, to be honest with you. I pay for it, I get the month, even if it's not free, I give it a try. But that's not the world. I've realized the world actually wants to know whether they're getting value for the dollar that they're paying. Now they might go into a store, pay $3,000 for a handbag. That's because they value the handbag. They see $3,000 worth of value in that handbag, which, I'm taking that example because when you see that, you're like, oh my god, you can spend 3,000 on a bag, because there are $20 bags available or $30 bags. But when you sell a $20 service, you get asked so many questions. That's because it's the value that's associated with that bag. Maybe the brand, maybe the leather, maybe the quality, maybe whatever it is. That company has done a good enough job to convince that this is worth $3,000. Now you got to give all the credit to Louis Vuitton for selling $4,000 bags. Not everyone gets to buy it. And if you gave me two bags, I probably couldn't tell the difference between a $4,000 bag and a $400 bag, but I'm sure there are differences. But we can speak to it from a software standpoint. But the thing is, the challenging part is, when you're a programmer, you have your machine and you're writing code, for example, you might write code, it may not compile if you're writing compile languages, or if you're doing interpreted languages, doesn't matter. You run into errors, exceptions, machine listens to you. You do it the right way, the machine is going to listen to you, it's going to accept what you give it, it's going to do what it will do every single time. But humans, do not have to listen to you. It's not in their interest. They don't have time for you. They have other priorities. They have other fish to fry. You're just one more person, one more email, one more message, one more phone call. Why should they take the time to entertain you? This is a this is remarkable because when you look at it as English words that I just said, it's not a revelation. Everybody's like, of course I know this. What's difficult? People need to want what you're selling. So why even stating this? Trust me, when you actually go take something to sell, I'm convinced that you'll recognize the impact of those basic words. Because even though I knew this 2 months ago, I knew this 2 years ago, I knew this 10 years ago that you're going to have to do selling is, I never thought selling was easy, but I had no idea that it was this hard. And
How
also
it is,
some,
yes.
and also then some things come naturally to us, and some not so much, right? Now,
Mm,
if you took Taylor Swift, music comes naturally to her, correct? Now there may be, I'm not going to say this, there may be other things that may take more that might take. This is a terrible example.
mm-hmm,
Taylor Swift is the best person in the world. I don't want to say anything stupid. All that I'm saying is if Taylor Swift becomes a programmer, maybe it takes Taylor a little bit more effort than it might take Taylor to compose the
mm-hmm.
songs. I don't know if it's a fair thing to say. Taylor may be a fantastic programmer as well, given all the talent she has. I'm pretty sure she has this talent as well. But I'm just taking a ridiculous example just because everybody knows Taylor Swift. So, uh,
Okay.
but for me, coming to a more pragmatic example, if I programming comes a bit more naturally, uh, other things not so much necessarily. Some do not. I mean, I have no abilities to compose music or play an instrument or draw, like I mentioned earlier. But sales is something I know I can learn, but I'm going to have to make an effort. I'm going to make a conscious
Mm,
effort. I'm going to have to push myself constantly outside my non-existential comfort zones, if you will. Because when somebody says, even to send a message to someone saying, "Hey Dan, would you like to collaborate with me on my podcast?" I could not have done it 2 months ago. I could not have. I'm like, why
mm,
am I? How am I going to send this message to Dan? Do I know Dan? What if Dan doesn't like this message, even though there's nothing wrong in the message? What if he's like, "Why are you sending me a message?" You're worried about all those things. But after two
yes.
months of doing
Doing
some
it.
level of prospecting, I think I've started to develop a slightly thicker skin, if you will. I'm not there yet. It's going to take a long, long time. Even now, when somebody says no for whatever it is that I reach out to, because I do spend 30 minutes, 1 hour prospecting and send one message out. And then you either don't hear back some most of the time, or you say, "No, I'm not interested." And I used to take it personally, and it was ridiculous. Now that I know
Mm-hmm.
it's 2 months after, but I still take it. But I'm like, why is Dan not responding to my message? It was so courteous. It was such a respectful message. And then someone tells me, "Krish, it's because Dan has no interest in what it is that you're selling." It's natural because you cannot always find the people to sell it. You're gonna have to try a lot of people, and then some of them are going to
Mm-hmm.
be interested in what you're selling. So to me, that
Mm,
is a very hard transition as a programmer, because you're used to, if you write more and more code, you try to get it right the first time or the second time, and you're like, why should it be any harder? Different jobs have different requirements and different skill sets.
skill
That's
set.
why
Yeah.
all of us are doing important work. You know what I mean? It's like
Mm,
not one. For a company to be successful, everybody
mm-hmm.
needs to be remarkably committed, talented, and passionate. It doesn't matter. You could have the best programmer, and if nobody else is doing what they're supposed to be doing, then it doesn't make a difference. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And a great example. And speaking of the emotional intelligence, how do you handle that team dynamics, communication challenges, or I don't know, maybe conflicts within your teams and your projects?
Yeah, the easiest way to handle conflicts is wait for you to get older. But that's not the best solution. It doesn't work. I'm just kidding there, right? Because as you get older, age tends to mellow people down, at least for the most
Mm,
part, I want to say. So you're gonna, things you questioned and things you thought were ridiculous will start to make a little bit more sense when you get to those points in life. That's how life works out. Because when I was much younger, I used to question our rituals back in India.
mm-hmm.
I would be like, "Oh my God, we have this ritual. It doesn't seem to make any sense. Give me a scientific explanation for this particular ritual." Sometimes you got the scientific explanations because they all have an explanation, but some other times people forget it. Because when you've had this ritual for 10,000 years, the rituals continue, but the rationale behind those rituals get diluted, it gets lost in translation. So you don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily understand the rationale behind those rituals, but trust me, every single one of those rituals that you question as somebody who's really young or older, it has a meaning, it has a purpose, it has an origin. A lot of them do, at least. And you're going to find the meaning as you get to that point in your life. You don't know when that point is, it depends on the ritual that we're talking about as an example, but you will find meaning to it. The reason I say that is, I know years ago, in one of my first jobs, I'm still very passionate about what I do, but I want to say that
Mm-hmm.
I've matured in certain aspects. Hopefully, I haven't attained nirvana yet. I'm not saying I've attained nirvana in maturity, but at least I think I've made some progress. At least I want to believe I've made some progress because I'll give you a simple real life example of something. I was working in a couple of different languages. One of them needed a flower bracket for the if statement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, before the flower bracket, after you have the if condition, you have the parentheses, and then you have the flower bracket. Now,
Yeah.
if you have a single line statement, you don't need the flower bracket in many languages, but you do most times need the parentheses. But there are languages where you don't need it. Some languages will not even accept if you have it, if they don't want you to have those parentheses. But
Mm-hmm.
there are languages where they're okay, right? You can either have it or don't have to have it. Like Ruby
Mm-hmm.
is an example, for instance.
Yeah.
uh, I wrote it a certain way, and then my coworker thought that it shouldn't be that way because it doesn't have to be that way. Now this is a situation where there's no right or wrong answer.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and when you're younger, and if again, this is because the company and the teams need to establish these rules. The linters, the way they weren't there at the time,
Yes.
they didn't work the same way they do today, so technology has improved, so you don't have to have these conversations. But still, the
Mm-hmm.
technology is all that no matter how fast the technology is moving, even with generative AI and everything that is to come in the next year and the years to come, I think human conflicts sort of outpace technology. I mean, this is not empirical data. I'm just saying what I think I've experienced. As humans, we get along sometimes, and sometimes we don't get along. And I wish we all got along all the time. That would be awesome. A world
Yeah.
where we all got along with everybody, accepted our differences, appreciated the differences, and learn from each other things that we agree and we don't have to always be in agreement, but we can be in civilized disagreement, so to speak, and still be
Mm-hmm.
friends, still be family, still be co-workers. But
Yes.
that's not we're not living in an ideal world, certainly not today, not in 2023. I hope 2024, as the year comes around, things change dramatically. But I'm
Man.
not so sure. I'm not so sure if things change at that pace. It takes hundreds of thousands of years for things to change. So I think it's important to have perspective. This is what I would tell you. I would tell a younger me that, Chris, you know what? If the coworker does not like the parentheses, or if they want to have it or do not want to have it, try to have a reasonable conversation with them. And I still believe I did at the time, but
Mm.
you may still not reach a resolution. Now, how do you handle those situations? There's no single straightforward simple answer, but the one thing I recommend is you should talk to the person directly. I think there's many ways to skin the cat, Dan, but in my opinion, the best place to start is by having the conversation with Dan. If Dan and Krish have a disagreement, Dan and Krish should be the only two people having a conversation about that disagreement. Let's not bring Dan's boss. Let's not bring Krish's boss. Let's not bring Krish and Dan's boss. I mean, there are situations where you have to involve people. I'm not talking about those delicate situations. I'm just talking about engineering situations, if you will, right? Try to see if you can come to an agreement between the people parties that have those disagreements before you
Mm.
escalate that situation, because too often it's very easy to escalate it. Send an email to your managers saying, oh, Dan did this, he should not have done this. Now Dan may have just agreed, Chris, you could have just told me, maybe it's okay, we'll figure out how to do this. So I think uh, it's important to pause. And one of the advices I've gotten in my career has been, Chris, when you want to say something, write an email, Just don't send it yet. Keep it in
Mm-hmm.
draft mode. Come back the next day. Ask yourself, you still want to send it. If that's not the most, if that email is emotional or something about that email is not very straightforward, give it a day, give it a couple of days. If you still feel like you have to send that email out, then go ahead, send. Otherwise, don't send.
Mm.
In today's world, I don't know. I guess Slack supports drafts. Maybe they do, but I don't know. If you add a draft message on Slack, I don't think you can have multiple drafts, but that's a technological discussion. I'm just saying, save it someplace else, and it's you'll be surprised. You come back the next day, you'll feel a little bit
Mm-hmm.
differently. You give it a week, you'll be like, ah, okay, you know what? It's a parentheses. I'm going to ask Dan. Dan, do you want it or do you not want it? When I'm writing code that you're going to review, I'm not going to include the parentheses when I'm writing code. When you're not in the picture, maybe I'll still do it the way I like to do it, for instance. So I think
Yes.
if you make an honest attempt at getting along with people, there is a much better chance that you will get along. But if you go to the
Mm.
meeting, if there is an element of ego, you're shrouded in this, it's going to make it difficult. And to be honest, it's not worth it. It's really, really not worth it because there's much bigger fish you're going to have to fry. This is not the biggest problem. If this
Mm-hmm.
is your biggest problem, you actually you have to feel ecstatic about it because then you don't have any other problems. You have food on the
Mm-hmm.
table, you have a roof over your head, you have a job to go to, you have a family that cares for you, you have friends to socialize with. You are blessed. So maybe this is a good problem for you to have. But if otherwise, do not give the problem too much respect, is what I would say. And then
And
by
importance,
and
yes.
the only way to do that is interact with people who are from different cultures, different religions, different societies, different languages, different
Mm-hmm.
worlds. I think the richness is, you enjoy the conversations when people are so different, right? If I have to be talking to everybody who looks like me, who talks like me, and who thinks like me, I would actually stop talking to them because it'd be so boring. To be honest with you, it's hard enough to look at a camera when I'm doing this solo podcast. It's actually
Yeah.
super exciting to see a real human sitting on that side, and it's okay if they
Right,
agree
right.
or disagree. I'm not saying every
Mm-hmm.
conversation is going to be amicable, and it should not be because the things you would learn, you know in your career, it's like a stock market, I would say. When
Mm.
you can never time your market, right? You buy a stock, you want to buy it at the lowest price and sell it at the highest price.
Yeah, you
unless
want.
you're unless you're Warren Buffett, you probably cannot do that, correct? So you're going to have to, they say that there are like 3 or 4 good days in the market in any given year, but you
Mm.
have no idea what those good days are. It doesn't have to be before earnings or after earnings. It could be a random day in a random month and a random quarter. You're going to have to write the entire year on that stock sometimes to enjoy those 3 good days.
Mm-hmm.
Life is no different. Life is no different. You go through a journey. You have people who agree with you, but if everybody agrees with me, then I would learn nothing in life. Most of the things I've learned in life have come from people who actually disagreed with me because they're like, no, Chris, you're not talking sense. This makes no
Mm-hmm.
sense. We should do it differently. We should do it better. You thought you could do it this way. That's the only way you have done it. Not anymore. Things have changed dramatically. Let's do it differently. All of this is going to be shocking because we all like to be in the comfort. You want to get up in the morning, do the same type of work. Software does not. I don't know which profession gives you the luxury, so I can't speak for other professions, but software does not. Every morning you
No.
wake up, JavaScript is changing every 3 days, right? And then right, you use the framework, and 3 days later, people are like, "Why did you pick up that framework?" I was like, "Because that was Google Trends showed me that everybody in the world is
Right.
consuming that framework, and then 3 months later, nobody wants to use it ever. They vilify you for picking that particular framework, for instance. On the server side, things change a little bit lesser, I think, than on the client side,
Yes,
for instance.
yes. Mm-hmm.
But that's what happens. So you're going to have to accept that what is great today, what is perfect today, what is remarkably brilliant and beautiful is going to be absolutely appalling and disgusting tomorrow when it comes to engineering. That is the truth of the matter. So you're going to have to accept it. You're going to have to take it with a smile and say, you know what, something was awesome yesterday, not so much today. Let me still pick up what is different today and learn and keep learning, because the only job security, my friend, is what you know. The
Mm.
company does not give you the security, nothing. The location you
Yes.
live in, the place none of the other things can give you the job security. but your own skill, your ability to quit what you're doing today and be able to do something else tomorrow without a recommendation from your parents, from your friends, from your family, from people hiring you for your ability but not knowing you before they actually got on the call with you is the only
Mm-hmm.
single security that will take you till you call it a day on planet earth, for instance, right? For a lot of us at least. So I think it's
Yes.
important to be calm, to enjoy what you're doing, but at the same time not be complacent, right? I mean, you can't do the same thing every day and then wake up one morning and say, oh my god, I don't have any skills. Well,
Mm,
you put yourself in that situation, didn't you? So you're gonna have to work your way through there.
mm, yes. And speaking of that, I mean, we discussed about the ego. The ego, I think, is the most challenging and difficult ones in working with people, right? Because there are different type of egos. How important is the role, the bigger is the ego. So when we discuss about software architecture or solution architecture, each one has its own perspective and its own ideas on how that should be and to be used.
I
Hmm.
think I'll give you an example. I used to work for Oracle, like I said earlier, and then I switched to consulting at some point.
Hmm.
Now when somebody hires me, this is what they like, we want to hire Krish to help us with X, Y, and Z. I don't even have a title. I cannot remember the last time I had a title, to be honest with you. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate not really having a title. I put a title on LinkedIn because that's what I do. I lead
Yeah.
teams, I build projects, I write code. So you need
Hmm.
to tell what you do. But from a formality standpoint, losing the title in that sense, if you know what I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
was very, very was enlightening, for lack of a better word.
Hmm.
It was beautiful because it did not. I mean, I have a quote in my office in the kitchen here that says, "If we all didn't care who got the credit, we'd all be doing building much bigger, better things because we don't care who got the
Hmm.
credit." Titles, I'm just taking
Yes.
title as an example. Ego, like you mentioned, comes in different forms and shapes. It's associated with many different things. To me, I chose to be a developer because that's what I enjoy doing. And I tell people I'm at the bottom end of the totem pole, right? uh,
Mm.
i'm you call me what you want to call me. You want to call me a junior developer, be my guest, doesn't matter. You want me to architect something, I can do it. You want me to lead a team, I can do it. I can do those things, doesn't regardless of what you call me and my title, right? You
Hmm.
could call
Hmm.
me the world's junior most developer. Krish is the world's junior most developer. Doesn't change a thing. You want to build an application tomorrow, can I build it for you? Of course I can. Did the title make any difference? No, it did not, right? But it but there is a notion of power that comes with title, money and power.
Mm.
These are all very addictive, right? When people report to you, one person, two people, 10 people, 100 people, these are these are addictive, right? Humans like it. It does boost your ego. When you have money, boosts your ego. The way you look might
Hmm.
boost your ego. The society you live in, the society you socialize with. So I think each of us has to find sort of normalcy where you feel yourself. If you
Yes.
are enjoying being part of certain groups and societies and all of those things, then there's nothing wrong in that. You should do that. But some of us just want to, in my example, if you take me as an example, Dan, I like to
Hmm.
build software. Um, I don't care much else about what's associated with that. So my roles when I pick
Hmm.
up these projects, we are a startup, right? A software startup that builds products, but we also do managed services to keep our lights on, literally. And
Hmm.
when you do that, it's very humbling because when you go pick
Hmm.
up every new project, people don't honestly even read your profile. They don't know what you've done in the past. Somebody interviewed you, you got hired, you put in a team, and the interviewer may not even be part of the team anymore. So you get thrown into a team and people don't know where Krish is coming from, what he does, what he did for a living. I've actually
Hmm.
done projects where people have known nothing about me when I've actually started with that team. And that
Yeah.
is beautiful because they have no judgment to make. I could have had 20 years of experience writing code in
Hmm.
six 12 different languages, but they don't care. They're like, hey, can you write this code in this team and solve this problem? How well can you do
Hmm.
that? That is all that matters. And when you think about it for a second, it's actually either, depending on which end of the spectrum you're in, it's either amazingly beautiful or it's
Mm-hmm.
outright scary, right? It could be one or the other. I don't think there's a middle ground there. I'm not saying everybody's going to take it the same way I take it in that situation, just much as I'm not going to take other things the same way they do. um, but if you do associate a lot of value with titles, positions, and the number of people reporting to you, you have to make sure you play your part in growing up, in going up the corporate ladder. Some of us
Mm-hmm.
enjoy going up the corporate ladder. Not everybody does. Some of us just want to build stuff, and if it happens, it happens. But we're not, navigating through that ladder. There's no right or wrong answer. You're gonna have to find
Mm-hmm.
what makes you happy and what makes you peaceful, and follow
Mm.
that direction, because it's not the same answer for everybody, right? Unfortunately, yeah.
Yes, yes. And you gave a lot of beautiful examples from your life and the perspective you brought here. And one of the questions that I was following to ask you was, if you were to have a new junior um, person now in your team, how do you mentor that, and what was the one piece of advice that you would give to him,
Yeah, I'll tell you one. You
to
asked me
her?
one question, I'll make it two questions. The one piece of
Okay,
advice I'll give to them, and the one piece of advice I'll give to myself, right? There are
okay.
two questions in my mind. I'll
Mm-hmm,
start with the piece of advice I will give to myself first. The piece of advice I'll give to myself is I need to lead by example. Now, if I sit here and talk the talk all day long saying, Dan, do this, do that, you should be doing better, you're not doing well, you should do this
mm-hmm,
faster, you should, do this very differently from what you've done. You can take all of that, but it's words. You've not seen Krish do any of that. Is he just talking the
mm-hmm.
talk, or can he walk the walk as well, right? To me,
Yeah.
leading is a very difficult proposition. It doesn't matter whether you're leading one person or you're leading an entire country. I think you're going to have to lead by example, because people actually see what you're doing, and they're going to take what you're doing more than what you're telling them that you're doing. Right? It's
Mm-hmm,
always easy to state what you're doing, but not showcase what you're doing. So the advice I give myself all the time is lead by example. If I want something done a certain way, and I think there's a good reason to do it that way, let me try to do it and show it to that person first, so they understand that it can be done, and there is a value add in doing it that certain way. Now I have to establish and buy my respect on day one or day two or day seven, whatever the day is, right? I need
mm-hmm,
to earn my respect. Sorry, not buy, I need to earn my respect. The advice I would give to the person is, you all of us have biases, sometimes unconscious bias, sometimes conscious biases. We grow up in societies. The bias doesn't necessarily mean, when it comes to other aspects of life, which I won't talk to because I'm not an expert, I'm talking even engineering biases. You
mm,
would have done things a certain way all along. Maybe you're just out of college, maybe you've done this for 5 years or 10 years. You're still, at the middle point in your career. You've not done as much as the other person may have done at that point in their careers. So you're going to strongly believe that what you're doing is the right way to do it. Right? It's
mm,
natural. Sometimes it's natural. I always feel like what I'm doing may not be the right way. I just start with that perspective. But I know there are people who start with the perspective that what they are doing maybe is the best way to do it, which may be, but maybe not. You're going to have an open mind before
mm,
you. Just because you've done a certain thing a certain way in the past, it doesn't mean the same thing should be done the same way in future, because everything changes. Technology changes, interest changes, the environment changes, the operating system changes, the version numbers changing, the market's changing, the market dynamics is changing, the macroeconomics is changing, the microeconomics are changing. Every single thing is changing. So what you did yesterday or 2 years ago, even if it feels like the exact same thing, you're going to have to do it very differently today, because a lot of things have changed in the macro and the micro worlds. So
mm-hmm,
keep an open mind. Before you reject someone else's idea, make sure you've done your due diligence. Make sure you've asked
mm,
yourself, hey, is there a reason why they're doing it that way? Maybe because they've always done it that way. Maybe because they're not doing it the right way. It's possible. But before you tell them that it's wrong, before you try to, however you communicate this to them. I know that in some places, in some companies, sometimes it's less amicable than in other places, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on the way you look at it. So you're going to have to ask yourself, is the other person doing it for a reason that I do not understand? If
Mm-hmm.
they are, then maybe I have some learning here to do. I think that's the singular piece of advice I would say. Thinking, do not, when you have a disagreement, it's okay to disagree. Please disagree,
Mm-hmm.
because you keep agreeing, we're not going to improve as people. But when you
Yeah.
do have an element of respect in your disagreement, so you should disagree gracefully, right? It's one thing to disagree, it's another thing to disagree with grace, meaning I want to disagree with Dan by not hurting Dan emotionally in any way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, Dan, no, I don't agree with your approach, here is why. And maybe I have a reason, maybe I don't have a reason, maybe I have a very honest conversation about it. But don't take any other bias outside of engineering. Ideally you don't want to have any bias, but if you cannot avoid all biases, at least avoid the non-engineering biases, right? Disagree with the
Yeah.
other person
The
for the
human
engineer,
ones.
for the engineering purposes, not for the non-engineering purposes. There's too many these days, so please don't disagree for those reasons. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and we're going into other directions there, and we can talk until uh, tomorrow,
Yeah,
or say
absolutely.
like that. So, if you were to build a new team now, and I'm pretty sure you have that, what qualities would you look for to create a supportive and collaborative work environment?
Brilliant question, right? I think a lot of my work, the work we do, Dan, is remote work. We've done remote work for the most part of our lives. Personally,
Mm-hmm.
me, it's not just during the pandemic or after or before. Most of the time, right? I do go meet people. As you can tell, I'm very chatty. But to me, when I chat with somebody over video or in person, sure, it makes a difference when you see people. But it's all right. I still enjoy it to a large extent. So we do a lot of it remotely. So when you build a team, I think you need to make sure uh, people represent. I want to say diversity, but not just diversity in terms of race and cultures. I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
diversity in all aspects. Even personalities, the variations are important. If you have a team full of quiet people, it's not as interesting as a team that has quiet people and not so quiet people, right? Now, how do you go about hiring all of this? That's a different challenge. But I'm saying when you build a team, define your requirements, define what is important for you, and try to make sure that there is nothing else that drives that decision but your requirements. I need a
Mm-hmm.
developer who is able to do this certain job. That's important. I need for them to do that for me. I'm hiring a product manager. I'm hiring a project manager. I'm hiring a salesperson. Uh, let's make sure that in your interview process, and how you go about the interview, all of that basically is in sync with your requirements. And I say this, I probably could articulate this better, but all that I'm trying to say is a lot of different perspectives come into play, and sometimes you lose the forest for the tree. So you want to make sure
Mm,
you find the best person for the job in the window of time you have available, of course. If you keep looking, I'm going to find somebody better and better and better, you're never going to get stuff done. So, say I'm going to spend 3 weeks looking to fill this position. Do whatever it is you can. Find the best person, no matter where they're located. A lot of our work can be done remotely, fortunately, right? There are certain
yes.
jobs that cannot be done remotely. So I don't think location, in my mind, should play any difference or a role. You can work with people
Mm-hmm.
from all over the world. You just need to be able to find credible, smart, talented, honest, committed, passionate people. That's a lot of adjectives. It's very hard to find people, but you're going to have to make that effort, because it's not just the skill, it's how somebody's going to fit into the paradigms of your organization. That's
Mm-hmm.
going to go a long way in how your team members are happy, and how you're going to go about building, because sometimes things take a long time to build. And even if they don't take a long time to build, as we might know as sales engineers, it sometimes can take a little longer to sell. So you want to make sure everybody around you sticks with you, sticks to each other, so we can all see that through and be collectively successful, essentially.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Krish. And One fun question that I ask to all my guests, if you could have dinner with any figure from the tech industry, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Wow, that's a beautiful question. Nobody asked me that before. So give me like 20 seconds. You said if I needed to have dinner, wow, okay, there is a lot of people, but you're going to have to pick one of them to have this
Yes.
conversation with. In today's, this question is very difficult and is easy at the same time. I'll tell you why. Um, if I want to have a conversation today with a tech person, uh, I think it would be Elon Musk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you why. Uh, you know it's not because he's the wealthiest man in the world, not because he's a very successful person, but even when you go back and look at some of the interviews and you read up some articles about Musk, in the early days of Tesla not being such a big company, the
Mm-hmm.
commitment to, again, people like him, some people may like him, some people not so much, we all have our opinions. I'm talking about his commitment to art, his how he's committed to what it is that he's doing, whether it's SpaceX or whether it's Tesla, whether it's one of those neuro companies or one of the many companies that he actually does own and lead. The
Mm-hmm.
breadth of interest that he has, and the levels of commitment that he certainly has by virtue of what we are seeing. I mean, Twitter and X could be an anomaly. I don't know. We'll see where it goes. Maybe he wants to have fun with that. I don't know how that is. But in general, outside of that, or maybe even including that, I always see him as a person who is pretty committed, super committed. Because when you have so much money, so much power, you could have, I think he had so much money like many years ago after the PayPal sale, right? You could have retired
Yeah,
at every
yeah.
step of your, in many years ago. Why do you keep going? Certainly, money cannot be the factor. If money is the factor, people will not achieve anywhere close to what they achieve. I think all these big achievers and
Mm-hmm.
successful people, I actually think, contrary to popular beliefs or not so popular beliefs, I don't think they're chasing money at all. They're chasing something else. What it is that they're chasing, only they would know. So if I had a chance, that's the reason I would want to talk to somebody like Elon Musk, is to ask that simple question: what is that drives you on a daily basis? You've got all that, you got the money, the power, the fame, everything, but you still work hard as if you don't have any of this, not as much as
Mm-hmm.
of any of that. So I would love to know the answer to that question, not just from Musk, but from a lot of people. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I mean, for me, at least, if I were to ask that, is creating an impact in society and creating and driving change and growth in people and teams and the mindset and so on
No, I,
and
I
so
love
many.
that. I love that question. I'm going to ask you, can I borrow that question from you and ask my guest if that's okay with you?
Sure, why not?
Thank you. This is a beautiful question. I think I've been on a number of podcasts, but this I think is a lovely, lovely question. Beautiful. Thank you for asking that. Yeah.
Sure, sure. If you were to recommend one book or one resources for our viewers that influenced your career or helped you, what would that be?
If I can be shameless, I'm just kidding. If I could be shameless, I was going to recommend my own stuff, but I'm not going to do that. Sorry. I'm just, maybe because I spent too much time in college, like I mentioned, I've never
Mm,
been able to find a way to read more books. I feel like I've read too many books, one too many during the early years. So I actually, in the current podcast I've been doing, on a lot of these, I'm doing a Salesforce series, right? I've not done that much work
mm-hmm,
on Salesforce. My recent podcast, I've been picking up Salesforce products and seeing how they can help me or us at the company or other people. And I'm exploring that as I'm going on the podcast without any preparation, much like I do these other podcasts. To me,
mm-hmm,
maybe that's not a direct answer to your question. I'm just giving an example, Dan, because uh, more than a single book or a resource, I think we all have to first find the best way we learn things, and there's not an easy or
mm,
simple answer. Some people learn things better when they go to a methodology, like taking a book, purchasing it online or a PDF or an ebook, and then going through it, flipping page by page. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do that at all. It's impossible. I mean, unless it's a novel I'm reading, right? Even if it's a novel like Tom Clancy's novels, as lovely as they are, for me they were just too fat, like thousands of pages that I had to finish it. And so you can't
Mm-hmm.
do it in one sitting, so you don't have the patience to do that, right? So I think the
Mm-hmm.
first thing is you have to figure out, how do you learn best? Do you learn best by reading? Then you do go with that approach. Or you learn best by trying things out, then you just start trying. Or you learn things by throwing yourself into the fire. To me, I do this all the time, but I figured that doing it on a podcast and I hit record when I come unprepared doing something new, it's actually quite exciting because I'm recording. I have never seen this product before. I have no idea about it, and I'm trying to figure this thing out. And I know, even though nobody's watching, then I know somebody is watching later. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
gives me that sense of excitement, and I'm finding that I'm actually enjoying that a lot more than I would have otherwise thought. For instance, so I don't know if I can give a single resource. I would just say find the best way you learn. Don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily be influenced by what other people might do, how they might learn it. Maybe you can, maybe you can try that. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Find the best avenues for you to learn, and explore other avenues and see which works better, and go with that. And I think you should explore the world. And since we're talking at the end of 2023, I've been advised many a times that, Krish, if you don't know the answer to something, look up Chat GPT. And I will tell you what somebody told me 2 days ago. I think they did some research and they figured if you know quite a bit about what you're doing, then Chat GPT makes a little bit of a difference. But on items where you don't know much about, it makes a ton of a difference, right? Which is a great way to put it, because all of us have certain skills. We know a fair bit of something about some things. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT makes some difference, not a dramatic or a seismic difference in those areas. But things that we don't know about, if you took me sales as an example, I'm going to leave it all to ChatGPT and have it tell me what to do. And 2 months later, I'll know whether it told me the right things or the wrong things. I don't know.
Yes, if that worked or not.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes, it was a strategy. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. One more questions is how and what skills do you think the tech people should have for the future, for the now and for the future? And
Two, and yeah, great question, right? I would say two things. One is the most obvious answer. Anything that has the word A, letter A, and the word letter I, and you put that together, AI, you're gonna have to do something about it. If you're in the space of engineering, you can't shy away from it. I've seen good engineers actually even initially shy away because people are worried, concerned, anxious, excited, stoked, passionate. You have any adjective you can think of, it's probably applicable. And I did
mm-hmm,
ask a similar question to my guest in the podcast I had the last a couple of days ago or a few days ago. I think it's important to learn that, but that everybody knows. What am I saying anything differently? But here's what I say. Uh, you have to continue to learn. I think it's the Japanese term kaizen. I think it's continuous learning.
mm-hmm,
I believe that's what I learned like many years ago. it's
yes,
it's amazing because when you think that you've learned, you should never feel like you've learned enough, because you've
mm-hmm,
not. There's too much to do in this world. None of us have enough time to do all of that we want to do. So try to do as much as you can do in the time that you have available on planet Earth, which means there's two parts to it. One is, what do you need to do to stay employed, so people pay you to have a decent life? You're going to have to do that. Hopefully you like what that stuff is. At the same time, you also have to find what you enjoy doing, regardless, even if those things did not pay, right? Now,
mm-hmm,
if they are mutually exclusive, that's all right. You might love to play the guitar. Maybe you're an engineer and you're not getting paid to play the guitar. You still have to keep doing that because that's what's going to motivate you to learn more AI. If you just did AI all day long and you didn't pursue your other interests, you're going to quickly lose interest in whatever it is that you're doing. So even if you're doing
mm-hmm,
something else that's dramatically different from what it is that you want to do, you better do it, because that's what's going to keep inspiring you to doing what you actually need to do to where you need to be, right? That's, I think, one
mm-hmm,
way to look at it. The other thing is, you need to make sure that even if you pick AI or machine learning or generative AI, these are broad areas, and you're not going to learn all of it or any of it in one day, a month, or a year. Take
mm-hmm,
it slow meaning whatever slow means to you as a person, right? Have It doesn't have to be a completely etched out plan. Like, it doesn't have to be etched in stone, right? I don't have those concrete plans. you try to pick the first item that you think you're interested in, like Python, for instance. I've done a lot of programming in a lot of languages. The least I've done with is in Python. Now you can do machine learning and related work in non-Python languages, but there's
Mm-hmm.
not enough library support for other languages, unfortunately, even with our programming or Golang or something else. So Python, you're going to have to be pretty good at that. Sure, just get started with, it's not a difficult language. Nothing is easy,
No,
nothing is
not at all.
difficult, right? So get started with that. Once you get started with that, you get an idea how to write Python code well enough. Now you understand what other things you might need to bring into the picture. Like, AI has a certain math component and a programming component. If you treat them differently, some of us are good in one or the other. And if you're brilliant, you might be good in both, right? So you figure where you fit, what you enjoy doing. If you're a great math person, focus on the math side of things. If you're a good programmer, maybe you focus on the programming side of things and know a little bit of the math, because
Mm,
none of these things are necessarily easy, right? These
no.
algorithms, neural networks, any of these items, it's going to take, you're going to have to rack your brains, before you get to a point where you understand this. But
Mm-hmm.
everybody needs to do it, and not everybody can learn everything overnight, and not everybody is going to be able to learn everything every all the time. So if you give it your best, who's stopping you? I mean, not everything that can be, I believe someone said in the mid 1800s that everything that can ever be invented has already been invented. I mean, that's the one statement that probably does not, can never age well. We know that that's never true. So things are going to keep
Yes.
changing. So don't get intimidated by other people. What they do, it's their life. It's not your life.
Mm,
You find what you're interested in. I think there's enough, as much as you read about AI is going to take away all the jobs. uh, you know we don't need as many people doing those things as we need today. Probably true.
mm-hmm.
But I think it's also true that it's going to change the type of jobs that are going to come into existence, which we don't know of today. Like, I don't know, 50 years ago, if someone said there would be a job, pick something that we're doing today that may not have existed 5 decades ago or 10 decades ago, for instance, they wouldn't have known that there would be such a job. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
what, I mean, was there something called UX design like 100 years ago? I don't know. Right. So nobody would have said that there was such a position. But now there is, we know that there is one. Similarly, we
Mm,
don't know of the titles that would come in future. So don't worry about it. Just learn, keep learning. Uh,
mm,
there's no easy way out. The short of it is, there is no shortcut here. You're gonna have to make them. It's like selling. You're gonna have to keep sending that next email and the next message, even though the last five of them did not end up the way you wanted them to end up, essentially. Yeah.
yes, definitely. And yeah, speaking of that, all the tech skills are in change. Everything is evolving and it's changing all the time. So one constant and the skills that are constant during the all the times are the human skills, which keep in mind that all the communication skills that have all the emotional intelligence, knowing yourself, knowing others, reading others, and so on and so on. The other part will remain unchanged during the time
Absolutely.
and are the
Absolutely.
base of everything we do. And that part of you said earlier on how to motivate yourself and how to find the joy of doing AI and learning AI by also recharging yourself from playing the guitar.
Absolutely.
It's it's another part. So this is what I also bring and preach, to say like that. I'm doing for me, but I'm saying for the others too. Okay,
No,
to
no,
find
absolutely.
yourself
Yeah, because
the drive.
because unless, if you want to do something for a short period of time, you don't have to like whatever it is that you're doing, right?
Mm,
Because let's say I don't like doing something, I can still do it for a month, maybe for 2 months, maybe not, but
mm-hmm,
let's take it as 2 months. But if you have to do something for a year, for 5 years, for 10 years, 20 years, all your life, you better like it. I don't think Christopher Nolan is making movies because he has to make movies. He makes movies because he knows how to make movies and he enjoys making movies, and nobody else can make movies like he does. There's
Right.
you get inspired by people who are so good at whatever it is that they do. Quentin
Mm,
Tarantino, for instance, right? Another
mm,
brilliant writer. I can, you can, the list goes on in every facet of whatever it is that you're looking at. We talk Taylor Swift, somebody's phenomenally talented when it comes to music. And not just music. I don't think the whole world is going to like Taylor Swift if Taylor Swift was just talented and was not a people person. Right? I have to believe that there's a whole lot more to Taylor Swift than the music that she's composing, because I don't know a lot about her music, but I want to say that there's a lot of talented people, but not
mm,
everybody is as popular. It's because people have made a connection. So I think
mm-hmm,
unless you enjoy doing it, how are you going to do it? Like, you're like, Taylor's like so wealthy, so popular, so much fame. Why does she have to continue composing music? Because she loves. I'm pretty sure, you enjoy doing it, you're good at doing it, and you get so much pleasure doing it. You have no reason not to do it. I don't think
mm-hmm,
it's sometimes people think it's only applicable to rich, wealthy, popular people. No, I mean, everybody's human. All of us want to do what we enjoy. The differences could be how much terms we can dictate, right?
mm-hmm,
How much money we make, what kind of reach we have. Those are going to be different. I understand that. But it's left to you whether all of those things make a difference to you. When I make
mm,
these podcasts, when I'm publishing articles, I'm not necessarily, if more people see it, great, but it doesn't change the way I do things. I put my best foot forward, whether one person watches it, whether zero people watch it, or whether a million people are going to watch it, right? I
mm,
cannot control that. And it's not my job to control it. What I can control is what I bring to the table in making those commitments. When I make the commitment,
yes.
I have to be able to sleep peacefully saying, you know what? Dan invited me to a podcast. It's very kind of him to do that. Did I do my best that I could have possibly done? Now, this may or may not be adequate. I'm just taking an example, randomly, right? This may or may not be
Mm-hmm,
adequate, but that I cannot help, because, Dan's expectations are Dan's expectations. I have no idea what those might be.
obviously.
And even if they are, you don't know if you can necessarily meet those expectations. And to be honest, I'll tell people that it's not our job to meet other people's expectations. It's our job to do our best. That's the only thing you can promise. If it meets your
Mm-hmm,
expectations, there is a pretty good chance it's going to meet someone else's expectations. As long as you don't set your bar too low, then you should be in good shape, essentially, right? So I think it's important to recognize these things. They're small, but I think they're worthy of recognition, at least from our standpoint, personally.
mm, yes. Oh, wonderful. If you have, if you wish for the audience to connect with you, do you want to leave here any social media profiles, websites, or other platforms you'd like to share for people
Sure.
to
Yeah,
find you?
absolutely. They can hit me up on LinkedIn. It's the best way, because
Hmm.
that's pretty much the only social media I actively use. So you can go to linkedin.com/in/snowpal, Snowpal.
Hmm.
You're welcome to, send me a message, connect with me there. Our product links, if you go search for Snowpal, like Snowpal on Google, you're going to find a lot of links. Please check them out. And if you like what you see, like our web apps or mobile apps or APIs, backends, and SaaS products, just do this tiny little thing by liking it. I'm not a YouTuber, but now I recognize why folks on YouTube say this, because no matter how much you do, we are all at the mercy of these algorithms, unfortunately. Correct? These tech companies dictate terms to us as well,
Hmm.
even as tech companies. So even the little activity of acknowledging something somebody did that you appreciated, if you did actually appreciate that, goes a long, long, long way. So now, having recognized that in the last 2 months of sales, Dan, I am
Hmm.
actually doing a lot more liking than I did even previously. I used to do that all the time, but I didn't always write a couple of lines on YouTube videos. But now I'm taking the pain to doing it, because it takes a lot of pain for people to create content, create
Hmm.
companies, employ folks, and we all have to sort of watch out for each other. So that's what I would just, not just for me, but I would recommend for everybody. But you can certainly, if you look up Snowpal and Krish, you're going to find plenty of hits, images, videos, and whatnot on Google. So certainly,
mm,
I'm more than happy to connect and help guide the little I know. I'm happy to share that little. Yeah.
mm. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Vibe It Up. I hope you enjoyed our insightful conversation with Chris. Before we go, I want to extend a big thank you again to our guest for sharing his valuable experience and perspective. So, if you, our listeners, have been inspired or have any other questions after this episode, I encourage you to connect with us. So, until the next episode, I wish you well and a great holiday, Christmas holiday for forever who has that holiday. If not, enjoy yourself and stay tuned. Have a great day. Bye bye.